لذی یک پیز جرنالیزم هم است دخواه ستوری تیلینگ شد باز ازی کنتینیویشن در حال حاضر کنکشن منی کی 19 نمود که مو 19 دوبارهش یکی شو داشتی چپتر 19 ای سنچری 19 از یا چم نره که او سری نخد سنچری 19 ایسی ده بیستو یاگه ٹھیک شد نه end 19 اونجا beginning 20 اینجا ده غول تمامی قصه تمام ده غوله دیگه نه که پنیر ده اینجا مایه من 20 مایه ٹھیک ہے نا اینالی 20 تاویلی پنیره 19 گسته جنگ ازرائه قد امیر کابل اور 21 گسته باز یه چیزی ازرائه بگیم چیزی ازرائه اینجا قتل عام ازرائه دیگه مطلب ده غولم خوی ایج وقت آرام نگرفته نه بری ازو گسته یک از حوالی برادرز که تاریخ سیاسی افغانستان از زمان امیر ابدالی تا ملا عمر قنداری تاریخ غصب قدرت با زور و قلدری و توطئه و تفتین بوده است. برادر را کور کرده، برادر را با ساطور قیله کرده، برادر خانواده و فرزند برادر را به اسارت گرفته و به سیاهچال انداخته و زنان برادر را با پستان از کتاره آویزان کرده و سر هزاران برادر کلمنار ساخته تا بقیه خایف شوند. هزاران برادر را دشمن بدخشانی گفته و به دست خود یا سربازانش به دهن توپ پرانده است. برادر میلیون ها برادر را با قتل عام و نسل کشی نابود کرده تا خود به تاج و تخت سلطنت برسد. برادر 2/3 نفوس و سرزمین برادر را به انگلیس سپرده و هزاران برادر را موشهای شقی و موذی خطاب کرده و با موشکشی به کلی تمام کرده است. برادر را حرامزاده خطاب کرده. پدر را زهر داده تا خود به سلطنت مطلقه دست یابد. پسر کله و گوش پدر را با گلوله بخیه کرده تا خود شمشیر سلطنت را به کمر آویزان کند. برادر تاج و تخت سلطنت را در تهاجم و تاراج برادر رها کرده و خود از راه پل سوخته تا قندهار و هند و فرانسه فرار کرده است. برادر را با قسم و سوگند قرآن به دام انداخته و در زمین سنگلاخ ارگ به دم اسب بسته و کشال کرده است تا قطع شود. مغز و دهان و قلب شاه با گلوله پسر برادر کفیده است. برادر در زیر دندان خونالود دهان کف کرده برادر تکه شده است. اموزاده را با کودتا به زیر انداخته و با اسیر گرفتن عیالش او را به استعفا وادار کرده است. برادر با تمام خانواده اش در ارگ مخوف با کودتای خشمگین برادر به تکه های گوشت و استخوان تبدیل شده و روی شاخه های درختان ارگ آویزان شده است. استاد داهی و خردمند و نابغه شرق با بالشت شاگرد وفادارش خفه شده است. رفیق با تیرباران رفیق به زبالدان تاریخ افتیده است. رفیق با توطئه رفیق از کشور فرار کرده و در آوارگی مرده است. فرزند راستین خلق بعد از این که خودش صدها هزار فرزند مردمش را اشرار و ارتجاع گفته و با شکنجه و زجر کش کردن و در دستگاه خاد نابود کرده به قله قدرت صعود کرده و از همان جا رفته است روی پایه های برقی که برادران شرور و مرتجع از آن برای نصب کردن جسد بیجان او استفاده کردند. برادر مسلمان را با بمب و راکت و انفجار و بارود تصفیه کرده و از رسانه های جهان جار زده است که به خون او تشنه است. سرزمین برادر را با سیاست زمینهای سوخته ویران کرده و هزاران نفر را در مزار و بامیان و یکاولنگ از تیغ کشیده تا زمین را برای نفاذ شریعت و اعمال قدرت بی‌رقیب امارت مسون سازد. This little part was on this 30th of April 2018. It was a piece of journalism that I had picked up from Aziz Ruish's page on Facebook, and part of it I read it for you about the Afghanistan that he describes. It's brother against brother. It is son against. این چه شوری است که در دور قمر میبینم. همه آفات پر از فتنه و شر میبینم. This is the beginning of 21st century. This is said today about a country that has never been out of that trauma, that crisis, that is not only political but economic and social and cultural and all the way that makes up a people, a nation, and you call them country. But that's a fake one, isn't it? If it doesn't function on these basic requirements, then it is not. My dear Nosogo and Bakulo and Ajigo, Tukhtoro, Zosto, boys and girls, wherever in the Hazara communities around the world you may be, listening to this chapter 28 on the Hazara Pioneers Library on Amunji's strategy at Mechidtv. We will come back to this brother Kushi later on. That is somehow been the history of these 2 centuries of this region. The Hazaras have suffered from it and probably caused it. We should look into the Girebani. So now the story has come up to the Chief Secretary being quite disturbed after his wife's and a newborn baby's death. Now, he is overtaxed. Not that he is paying a tax, but he is really doing the work of many men. He's not attending home, he doesn't have a private life, he doesn't have a personal life, he's all the time overworked. The more he does, the more he gets an overload of work. آفرین خیلی خوب کار منی ما تو این میدیگیشم کنم. How does that happen? What kind of a court is this? What kind of a system works here? If brother is been killing the brother for the last 1.5 century or 2 in Kabul and surrounding, then is it happening today? Yes. So what has happened to this society? This society has never come out of its crises. It is always degenerated and dispersed and dismantled. Let's go back to our 19th century, 1890s, when the Hazara war is going on. Behind the scene, the prisoners of war are taken. A part of them is Gulbegum, through whom the narration of the story has come to us via LILLIAS Hamilton, who had nothing to do with the war, nothing to lose, nothing to win. She was just a court physician from the royal family of Britain, working there and writing a story, a novel, leaving as a cultural legacy of you and I. Chapter 28, Overtaxed, Overburdened, Zeri Fishar. Months rolled on unnoticed. The Chief Secretary had but one thought. یک فکر داره فقط his master که آقا را چطور امیر صاحب چطور خوش نگاه کنیم. That sympathy in the time of his great trouble had welded him to the royal service in a way that nothing else would have done. اما مهربانیایی که بعد امیر دزو نشان داده بود که خیره ما هستم رایت و خیلی اور خوش کرده بود و میخواست که جبران کنه و بیشتر کارگری شروع کرده بود. Outside his work he had no interest. Only a craving. فقط یک خلش یک بیتابی درون چی مخوره. A heart emptiness he could not have described. همین دل چی از هر چیز خالیه. مایده او گفتم نمیتونی چی گبه. We must find you another wife, the Amir had said more than once. But the Chief Secretary showed no disposition to fall in with this suggestion. I have my children to interest and slaves you have bestowed upon me to serve me, he had replied. همیشه ما گفت جناب همه چیزی زوستور ما نگاه کردیم بشار کردیم دیگه اونا خدمتکار زیاد طویل از ما کردین. I have all I require. A wife would only take up my time. And I have none to spare from government service. ما خو کاملا 100% خدمت سرکار نمیخوایم که باز توجه من دیگه طرفشون کار زیاده. This argument of course appealed to his master, who was nevertheless frequently conscious of a certain restlessness in his favorite. متوجه بود. دلش خوش میشد که ما گفتم من بدون امیر ما چطور کاری لگده برم، مگر بعضم چی میشه بود بلیزی که حالش خوب نیه. Send for your brother and have him to spend the summer with you. چطور؟ ده هندی بریتانیایی و دیگه برارد کارمانه او رو بخواه اینجا یک لحظه می تابستان را اینجا یک جای کم وقت تیر میشه. He suggested that might do you good, and so the brother came. Berari Chief Secretary Ahmad, glad to escape from the burning sun that was scorching up the southern plains. او تابستانی دیگه تابستان هند را خدا نجات بیده پنجاب و طرفای مهاراشتر و I don't know northern India را که بگیری دمو belty equator. Still the official seemed nervous and irritable and did not appear to derive the comfort that was expected from the presence of so near a relative. هی تاثیر نکرد برای ازو. اونو مرقم مورا و دکار مصرفه. خوب است برای نان خوردن چطور است؟ این تاثیر نکرد. You have far too much to do. بیخی زیاد کار ننی تو؟ His brother said, "It's all as plain to me as yonder road to India. 30 guests from how many different tribes?" هوی قدر کار خود اینجا کسیل کنه معلوم باشه. تو سی قبایل را تو مثلا سروکار داری قدرزنا. With all their petitions to attend to. که امروز یک درخواست آورده قبیله صاحب که ما جنابی مشیر اعلی شما بعد از امیر شما خداوندی بزرگوار هستین امیر دیگه در حال از ما رحم کید. درخواستش شده در لین میمان خانه. The Amir's private as well as public correspondence. امیر هر چی که شخصی نوشته داره هر چی که دفتریه و دولتیه تمامش از قلم ازی تیر میشه. All the foreigners in the government employed to look after. خارجیه و از داخل. The many requisitions from the royal gun factory, the distillery, شرابخانه، داستان ازو، کارخانه تفنگ، the tannery، اینجا که پست رنگ منانو، and what not. کدام department کی تاویل ازی نیه. You have the work of 20 men. Is it not so, Gulbegum? He said, addressing the girl who stood offering him some sharbat he had sent for, but which he did not seem to have time to drink. Your master never rests, does he? بدي إشارة من نسون Gulbegum مغي صاحب أصلاً قرار جندرة بنظرهم. The girl only shook her head sadly. She did not think it was her place to comment on her master's work, even to his brother. The chief secretary smiled hopelessly. I think I have too much to do, he said, but in this country, who has the AMIR to trust but me? Tu bagi? Tu namish nazi mulgra? Kabul ra namu fahmi? Hiç kas re etibar namitana, faqat man hastan. As for me, I have no one that I can get to help me in anything. Ma hu bekasum. The Amir will soon have no one at all either. Banaziram Amiram bekas shudani zud. The brother replied indignantly, you are working yourself into your grave. Anyone can see that. What's more, you will get into trouble someday for neglecting some of those many works that you have undertaken and will find a halter round your neck as a reward for your many services. Instead of a pension for your old age, such as we get in India. What do you advise? Chimagitu, the chief secretary asked despondently. I do not undertake these works myself. They are thrust upon me. Chis kar kanum? Magamma. Any digation ma him iram. Now look, for instance, at this paper. It is my annual report. Ali shikayat mana ki tawil izma mana bazu kar ki ma anjam midum uda natijam na mersa. This is my annual report on the general condition of the country. تمام اطلاعات ما که در کشور چی مگذره چی گپ است. And my opinion concerning it و چی باید کرد چرم نوشته کدام. Here are my suggestions as to possible improvements in the education of the children in the larger towns. در قریه و شهرهای کلان این پلانی تعلیم تربیه. Nothing could be simpler and more easily carried out and nothing is more necessary. تمامی ضروری قرار کردم. اولویت دادم که اول باید اینی کار شونه، اینی رقم شونه، اینی حال خرابه، اینی رقمه. تمام چیز تیار کرده اشتم. I shall be told that it is excellent. بس ما کیر بردم که پیش کردم مگه به. خیلی خوب. آفرین. Well advised. خیلی صلاحیت و بهترین. And carefully worked out plan شده. But that the time has not yet come to do these things. The 19th century, Kabul Maga, there is no time to do these things. And the 21st century, Maga, there is no time to do these things. It is all useless. And yet this report is one of my chief duties. Kadani bayad master mera. And what can be more important to any country than education? Year after year, I prepare these things. And year after year, there is nothing done. Only kagazi karwai, only paperwork. Munim. It is enough to take the heart out of anyone. Then here again is a matter to which I have devoted much time and thought, the best and most economical way of treating the prisoners. مثلا این رسالكو بهترین پلان که ای قسم شما بندی ده دار رقم جرم جنایت درو راس پر کدن هنار خورده رئیس بیتام جخاو کده مگومینار ای رقم بور کنی تربیت کنی سرنا و آماده کنی که بند جور کو پول جور کو تمام برنامه ما جور کدام اشتام اینجی برای اقتصاد. Thousands of them in this country who have committed no special crime. But have been reported as having done so. Are sent to prison to await their trial and are then forgotten. Dek jurmi nakada. The bandikana ordamasha, ek duruz gaptora sazbat faramosh. They have no money. Poor wretches, but bakhta paisam nadra. Wherewith to bribe their jailers to bring them forward. Ke Allah yani chan rupir madaram maram namaz mara do adalat bu pesh kamanji ke marshar bandik de. When the heads of the police go around, so there they sit year after year. Baz او قماندان یا چیزی ما تانیدار بگی یا انسپکتری تانه یا پلیس स्टेशन وقتی که تبدیل میشه این نفر رفت پرموشت که زبانی که ما خدا دور از ما 5 نفر مشاور داشت و که بالچ رفت هیچ چیز معلوم نی کی آورده کی دو کجا بنده چی کیسه چی حسابه. Eating up government food and learning to become lazier than they naturally are. این رقم تو بیخ society رو بکن. از لحاظ اجتماعی degenerate کشه. But I might as well have left it all unwritten. These poor fellows will go on sitting there, degenerating and degenerating. هر کاری که ما اینا کدام تمام کیس فایلر جور کدام اینام بیمانه. And roads and reservoirs will continue unmade. What can I do? إيش توصية نمشى إيش اكتشاف نمشى إيش انكشاف نمشى in the 19th century. Why? Take a holiday, of course. Yeah, boro bachesh tatilko. Ela bidhama chizra. Come home with me this winter. Zimistan bori in Hind. And if you wish, return to Kabul in the spring. The Bahara in the pas Kabul bia. Tawistor maqatumishnam zimistor bori. But I don't like this country. Ho turbugum. Why should you stay slaving here? It is a country of horrors and of terrors. وحشة وبربرية تستنجي. چیز دیده تو این شته. You have lands of your own. زمینای آبای تو پرتا اونجی. به پنجاب. Lands which, if properly managed, instead of being allowed to go rack and ruin, would yield you more than a sufficient income to live in ease and comfort, or if you must work for the British government. The pay is small, but it is secure. And the position is indisputable. You must get leave to come home with me. You need fix nothing definitely about the future now. He went on, seeing the official shake his head despondently. Get a month's leave and let the events that occur while you are at home decide what your next step is to be. یک ما تعطیل لازم داره حالت بسیار خرابه این رقم نموشه وکی بوری هند بوری گلازا قد قومای خو بیشی کم فکر کو کم استراحت کو بازار برنامه که جور نی جور کو زوجین جور کو I know the AMIR تو چی میشناسی AMIR را He would not understand my wanting to leave him. How he would think my interest in this cause was flagging. فکر نکیب تمہاری لامی دیالیا. My enemies would put all sorts of false reasons before him, and I should probably find myself in prison. نزیرک تمہار دروکش نی یا قوچ خوب نیا دبندی خانه رای نمار. دشمن زیاد درم. Let's pause for a little while. In the chapter, I don't know, 20 what, we did show you a little hand with 5 fingers, as usual you have, hopefully. Yes, most people have, but they don't know that this is the hand that has come out of your sleeves, and they are pointing to 5 characters here. Khudi, Qareeb, okay? Rishtadar, Andwal, Dost, Ibu, Falan. This one is away. This is a Raqib, competitor. This is the Harif, who is 24 hours thinking ill of you, doesn't like you, hates you to the core, and the enemy who just wants you to complete destruction. The mani har group, har ijtima, court, team, organization. اینیمیر نارمالی پالیتیکس مگه که گند سی بور شده مگه ای پالیتیکس منه دراو یعنی دراو دشمنی منن حریفی منن کامپیتیشن منن و خصوصا the 19th century court عبدالرحمن کی چیف سیکرٹری تمام ذمه‌داری آفیشال تقریبا تبلیغی کمرک شده خاتون چه از بین رفته خودش در از بین مره و این خبر داره که اینجی هر نفر دیگه حریفی دیگه دشمنی دیگه این را میخواه به برادر خود بفهمن نه که تو 5 نخون را میشناسی یا نمیشناسی به ای nonsense. They would only be too glad to see your place empty. حریفای تو خوش میشه که خوب شد که یک کرسی اینجی چوکی خالی شد که مو باری بشینی بلیزو. Nothing would please them better than to get rid of you and have a chance of holding your appointments. Este position to qabza kana. I wonder how they would like it when they got it, huh? خوش میشه. And the guests, though grieved, could not help smiling as he thought of the work that went hand in hand with the honor of the office of Chief Secretary. مگه چطور؟ عادی که تو رفته نی اونا خب چانس پیدا نه تو بعد مگه نال بگیری جای زیره. You don't know these people. برار هندی ما تو دا کابل نمانده. The official said again, one has to live among them to understand them. Participant observer में खाया मनेजी मनीष बाश वो observe को बाज मुफाहमी तो they are not satisfied to hold the office and draw the salary of a rival कि मोवाल हरीफ खुरपास के दे मोजाइज़ बिशने. They want his downfall, his utter ruin, his death. कार दुश्मन है नहीं utter ruin, complete तबाही इस तरह دنيات كذا شتا يرمى دشمن. That is the Kabuli nature. Then I'll speak to the Amir about it myself, his brother said boldly. I'll tell him there are urgent private family affairs that can only be settled by you in person. جناب امیر صاحب اجازه بدین بسیار مشکلات خانواده ابراریم باید بوره یک دفعه در وطن خود در پیشی مردم خود بوره در پنجاب بوره در زمینای خود بوره در اونجا مادر مام تنایه پیر شده امیر تعطیلات روان کو. For it is so many years now since you were at home. You are not able to grasp the situation from my description. And so it was arranged, but he soon understood the uselessness of his petition. The Amir withdrew his favor at once from the hitherto honored guest, and he was sent home with considerable haste and not too great courtesy. زد همی برنامه که پیش کرد پیش امیر گفت فوراً گفتی رئی کو زنجی. Moreover, the chief secretary found to his cost that he had indeed enemies. بازو بريش confirm شد که بابا اینجا هست اونایی که تو شک داشتی شک نکو confirm enemies داره. In a court full of intrigue and jealousy. Who has not? یک درباری که فقط سازش و پلان و حسد و کینه و از این چیزها باشه دیگه تو در نظر تو انمی پیدا نمیشه. Like vultures they stood round watching for the slightest flaw, the faintest weakness in the man whose post they coveted. بعد شروع شد دیگه. وقتی میگه بکی دربار خبر شد برار شماد گفت یه خو برار زیر فوراً جواب داد رئی کرد لیکن اینجا تمام دربار خبر شد حسودا. دشمنان گفت time to attack. اینالی که تو مثل لاش خوراوری فقط امو ببینو که کی نفسی منتی میشه. Here was their chance. They discovered they could at least, at any time, provoke the Amir against his favorite by hinting at his desire to leave the country and seek repose elsewhere. فقط دنبال چانس بودن که چرخم گوشی امیر پر کده بورا بنیزی. At first the suggestion met with indifference. And an even occasional angry retort. Something like this, yeah. Amir Kham Bezari. But after a time, the shaft sank in and made the Amir determined to chain this man. آخر مجبور شد گوشه زوبیخ پر شد. چیف سکرتیر مشیر علار گفت بندی کی نیره. تاکه خوندی نشنی امیر خم از دیسمون نره. On whose services he was so dependent. چرا؟ به زود تمامی درباری کابل میشنه. کس دیگه در زیر اعتبار نیه تمام کار تاولیزیه. More closely to his capital and thinking he was unsettled owing to domestic discomfort. بعض موقع ای خانه زیال خانه زی خرابه ای چورت زی بسیار گڑبڑه ای کاری دفتر درون نمیتونه چیکار کنی بریزی. He began again looking around for a suitable wife. که تایر خاتون نکنی بریزی ای آلشی میتر جور نمشه. One who was young, جوان باشه، good looking، زیبا and had a sufficient dowry و خوب جیزم بایره. امسی یه شرط میله تقریبا از دان از برو مشه گب. The Amir's intentions soon became an open secret, not only in the city itself but in all the countryside. أطراف كابول، أطراف شهر كابول هم تيد مشه گب. Then spread to distant provinces. ولایت‌های دور دراز را مردم خبرش چیز میخوای امیر میخوای برای مشیر علایق این میتونی یک زن دکار داره. چیز کار مشه اجتماع چی رقم رسپاند نه در 19th century و امروز چی رقم رسپاند نه تو سعی کتو. The chief secretary was quite the best party available outside the royal circle. بعد از خاندان شاهی دیگه از اینکه بال چیزش نیه دیگه از هر لحاظ suitable. He was the court favorite, number one. از اینکه بال کس دربار بعد از امیر نمیه. He had been allotted the house that had been always occupied by the vizier when Afghanistan could boast of such an official. هر زمانی که وزیر داشته بوده اینمی خانه وزیر بوده. تو یه بفهم که اینمی وزیر اعظم دیگه چیف سکرتری برای چیزی کابل دربار کابل. Drew what was considered in Kabul a very high salary, تنخوام زبردست. And moreover he had many allowances and consequently but few expenses. خرج کم بالا نشین. Besides there were the gifts that fell on him or to him in virtue of his office. تحفه و تحایف که بزبیتا هرفته یک نو تحفه both from the AMIR and princes, but more especially from other sources. And these were quite worthy of anyone's considerations. عالمینا کافی نیه که نفر بلیمزو کار کنه زحمت بکشه و قدردانیش کنه. Last but not least, perhaps in importance, was the fact that not only had he no other wife at that time, but was known to have always been satisfied with one. در کشوری، در مردمی، در اجتماعی که بیش از یک خاطوره پولیگمی که مگوره. مونوگامی یعنی یک زن کدن. پولیگمی یعنی بیشتر از یک زن 2 3 4 5. باز میر و وزیر کی بودی باز ورد تعداد زیاد کو. But was known to have always been satisfied with one, and that circumstances, even in a country where polygamy is not only tolerated, but in many cases encouraged and sometimes almost forced, is considered of the very first importance in the selection of either a son or brother-in-law. از این لحاظم بهترین داماد که فقط اونمو وفادار یک زن است این مرتکب. What we should consider the natural order of events was therefore absolutely reversed in this case. یعنی کاملا جور تیار که یعنی میزی که بهتر کار نمیشه باید خاطو کنه بر امیرم خوشحال همه چیز سر کار نمیشه درم. Instead of young and handsome suitors vying with one another in the richnesses or their attire, their youth and comeliness, waiting outside her window for some sign from the fair lady to whom they would fain pay their devoted court, elaborately caparisoned horses carrying undoubtedly rich and prosperous riders sought interviews with the chief secretary for the purpose of laying before him an account of the various virtues, accomplishments, charms, and positions of their various female relatives, sisters, daughters, cousins, and more. The list of the names of the applicants for his favors swelled in numbers. The higher grew the dowries that were offered, but the chief secretary would have none of them. أنا على دقة خب بهترين دامادي دنيايا بعد از شاهی خاندان یعنی نامداره حالی که دنیا هم خبرش دادی که والی مایه مردم کسی که یعنی از ما یعنی تو بسیار خوب شه تر یعنیش بسیار امیر خواهم او از ما یک دختر داریم بسیار یک زخوار از ما بسیار ماشاءالله دیگه. But the chief secretary would have none of them. اصلا مقبر His friends began to tell him of the dangers to which he was exposing himself by his want of compliance with the Amir's wishes. بسیار خطری ری امیر در اون موقع که می کار کنه تو هر کدامش میگه بری کمشین. The worry upset his health. آلیب تشویش ایر باز گرفت مزید ناجور. And distracted his attention from his work. آل کار خورم نمیتونه. His correspondence, everything got into arrears. نه صرف نامه و جواب نامه که نوشته کردنیه از این دفتر دزو دفتر از این پرنس دزو دربار اونا خمانده and finding himself quite unable to cope with the accumulation دید که ولای خبار شد he engaged a Mirza, a clerk, whom he swore over the secrecy on the Quran to help him. یک دن میرزا یک دن منشی یک ستنو بریخ پیدانه که فقط ما تو دیکتیشن میدم تو قرآن قسم بخور که خد کس نمیگی خو because this is a secret top secret document of فایل درباره تمامش دیگه مجبور میشه که یک دنه ستنو بریخ بگیره. Therein lay the great mistake. اشتباهی بزرگ شد. Things were made easier for the moment to become more complicated later on. این کارش خواسان شد کم کمک شد که کارش پیش ماره مگر خیلی پیچیده کد معامله را. Certain state secrets eked out. رازها بور شد. قسم قرآن دا جایخ من formed a topic of gossip and wonder in the town. تا بیخی تا شهر بازار تیج شد گوا. زبان خلق نقاره خدا. And in the course of time came round to the Amir. خبر شده دربار رسید. No suspicion rested on the chief secretary at first. چیزی مشکوک نشد. He had proved himself too trustworthy for that. او اعتبار زود پخته بود. سالها کار کرده بود. خیلی زود مشکوک نشد. And was moreover too constant and too evidently honest in his endeavors to find out whence the report proceeded. He felt that he had an enemy and a very active one. امی قدر فهمید که است یک بودن و خیلی فعاله در دربار خلاف از می دشمن who was constantly endeavoring to get him into trouble. He became more nervous and irritable than ever. He could no longer look ahead and clear his path as he had hitherto been able to do. Ali اصلا مخش کار نمیده. idni bibina پیش چیز کار کنم. He saw only the present accumulated arrears of work that he was forever fruitlessly striving to cope with. هرچی او کار انجام میده ایجا انجام نمیگیره. کورت شده رایه دیگه میره پیش میره دب باز بسیم دیگه استر میره. این برای شماست صاحب. And he felt that his enemies were gaining ground. ولی نمیشناسه درو. گیر نمیتنه. مگر خوب مفهمه که درو نه همینطور برابر کده پایره. He could not quite see where or how. He no longer felt the same confidence in himself. وخی اعتماد از دست رفت. Morally عالی درو داون شده رایه. And to a great extent he lost his power of amusing and attracting his master. حال بخی امیر بخی قارش مایه که منگرنه. He became more often a butt for a joke or the subject for some biting sarcasm than he had ever been. ورقم تنزها وقدر جملها که اصلا تخوخ نشنده بود دیزی سالهای سرویس ده اینجی. یقدر حالت خراب شد. And the ready answer for which he had been so noted and so feared was now seldom forthcoming. و معروف بود که می چیزی میشنود فوراً جواب شد میداد. یک جمله تحکمانه مگر حال بخی از دانشی حکمت بور نموشه. Moral down نه. That man has never recovered from his wife's death. He is still paining to go home. The Amir said one day when Beaten in an argument, the Chief Secretary had left the room crestfallen and not in the best of tempers. یک روز قد امیر شطرنج بازینا بز اونجا میبازه باز امیر قم اوقات تلخ بور مشه بازی مگه نفر بعد از خاتون خروس نشدی. If he only wants to go home for a visit, why won't he marry an Afghan wife and leave her here to take care of the children till his return? Suggested an old vulture. کونه لاشخوره منجک صدا زد گفت که اگر او رفتنی وطن خود چرا منج خاتونه نه که خانهش نگاه کنه تا و پس باید. Who had been dismissed from office some time before and was sadly in want of the salary of which he had been deprived. دیگه چند وقت پیش برخاست شده بوده. حال دلش میخواسته دیگه رقم باز خود خردرون کنه. If he once gets away from here, he has no intention of returning. I can tell you, whispered another. لاشخور. Quite loud enough for the Amir to hear. كم دمگوش امیر بخوره. که صاحب اگر ما فکر نم که اگر رفت کلاک پس بای. His brother is in the employ of the English. خبر خود دارین صاحب که برا رزی برای انگلیسیا کارنا. Doubtless when he was up here, he offered him bribes and a good appointment among those kafirs. شما فکر زیر کدا باشین که براش برای چیزم دادینجی. To induce him to reveal state secrets to them when he gets down there. این ایتر صاحب شما خدا فکر نیستین نه ما خدا فکر شما هسته. It is certainly strange how since that same brother's departure matters have been talked about that had better been kept secret, croaked a third. گفت بعد از اینکه برار از رفت شما دیدین که چطوری رازها افشا شدین می برار ازی تمام چیز را خبری نداره که اینجی کلر که بدمزه بیکار کرده. And stranger still is how the discovery of these private matters seems to upset him. وقت دیده چقدر قارشم ده؟ Continued another. ایمی راست باشه. If he were not to blame, why should he care? اگر او مجرم نیه چرا قدر اوقات تلخی نه؟ He looks as if he were guilty of something, the consequences of which he fears. يقول قاباسته صاحب. I never saw a man so changed. It all dates from his brother's visit here in the summer too. There is something distinctly odd about it. اینی زبیتا پف کدم آرده که نیا اللي رفت قار کد بعد از بازی شطرنج اینا شروع شد انشالله خورا. Oh, you jackals! You never dare to approach an enemy till you smell death about him. نگد دیگه تیم خو وقتی که سری حال بود خویج رنگشم معلوم نبود حالی که درو نزدیک مرگ رستش لاشخوره وری نزدیک مشین شما تمام شما. The Amir retorted angrily, Get out of my sight! Rogues, you little tattling disgust me. How dare you venture to carry it on in my very presence? So they retired in silence. But they knew that the poison that they had infused would filter in time, and they were prepared to wait for the direful results they knew it would produce. زهر خورند المنتظر از است که کی تاثیر کنه. This was the intrigue of the enemy and the five fingers of the how, ni hao. Ma, how are you? Who are you? Azizani man, Bakulo and Nosego and Najego and Achulo and the boys and the girls, whoever. Hopefully this has been communicated through you, this scene of an Afghan society, Kabul, where a chief secretary from the Indian origins, from the Punjabs, Sultan Muhammad, is working with the Amir, and it was also a reflection of what kind of, there was no bureaucracy basically. like offices and everybody knowing there. In 19th century, there were no offices. Do you think there are some offices today? I don't know what else to say, but to make a point on a society where brothers have been killing brothers in the 20th century and the 19th century and the 21st century. Yes, there are a lot of surrounding countries interfering with it and big powers playing great games since then. This is the 19th century, 1800. For nearly a century, the two most powerful nations on earth, Victorian Britain and Tsarist Russia, struggled to outmaneuver one another in Central Asia. Those who engaged in this shadowy contest in the vast no man's land to the north of India called it the Great Game. It was the real-life world of Kipling's Kim. Rudyard Kipling wrote a Kim. That's a very nice story. I think those who are interested in literature must have read it. If is also Rudyard Kipling. Have you read If? See if you can online find it and read it now. So the Great Games, and then the World Wars, and then the Cold Wars, and then there is proxy wars, and then there is hybrid war. Today, in the 30th of April 2018, the atmosphere of power play and ruling people and running governments, those who news वगैरह की सेल करने, we are living in an era of psychological warfare. हम लोग नफसियाती जंग के दौर में रह रहे हैं. The question though is, are you a warrior in a garden or a gardener in a war? Aikido! Nowruz Zawar.